women who've been out of the program for 5, 6, 10 years. And instead of falling back into the circumstances they were in before, they're actually still improving, achieving transformative impact on the participant's life. And only then can graduation happen. Small is beautiful, scale is necessary. Saying to government, you need to, these are the different parts of the program, and you now need to look for consumption stipend and, an investment for seed capital or an asset or something, and you need to look for this workforce and so on. We are working with governments on what they've already got available and what they can anchor this program.
Hi, welcome to the Exchange podcast, where we cover stories of system orchestrators and their journey of exponential change. I am Siddharth, your host. I have with me today Aruna, who is the head of the Leaders Lab Network at C4EC, and Stephanie Grockerhoff, the global lead for systems design and impact at BRAC International. Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to Bangalore and our podcast.
Thank you.
Right. Your titles are mouthful, so sorry, this is the third take that we're doing. But just a little bit about yourself, if you could just let everybody who's listening, and us, mostly me, know a little bit about your journey, what you've been doing, and how you got to where you got.
Yeah, and don't worry, most of my colleagues stumble over my title as well. I'm actually the Global Lead for Program Design and Impact at BRAC's Ultra-Poor Graduation Initiative. I've been with BRAC for 2 years now. Before joining BRAC International, I was working for an organization called Oxford Policy Management, OPM, and I was leading the poverty and social protection team. And one of the things that I saw across a lot of my work is that governments were very interested in this graduation approach that BRAC was instrumental in developing, but struggled to sort of implement it in such a way that it had the impact that BRAC was able to have with its original project, and that a lot of RCTs showed could be had across the world. So part of what brought me to BRAC is UPGI, which is the Ultra-Poor Graduation Initiative's new focus, which is to say, can we rethink how this graduation approach is being implemented in such a way that it works better for governments to implement. And maybe I can just take a moment to explain what this graduation approach is, that, the Ultra-Poor Graduation Initiative. In about the 90s, BRAC realized that its programming wasn't reaching the poorest of the poor, right? And that all of the different interventions just weren't reaching that cohort or weren't able to have a real impact on their lives. So developed this graduation approach. And what it is basically it's an 18 to 24 month intervention that provides access to an asset or a productive livelihood to the household. It helps the household meet basic needs, because as we all know, if you are hungry, if you have basic problems, you aren't able to pursue a productive livelihood. You will sell off your asset to eat, to deal with shocks. And all of this is underpinned with coaching and mentoring. And that coaching and mentoring covers a whole bunch of things. It covers like getting you ready for your livelihood, teaching you skills relevant to your livelihood, helping you troubleshoot your livelihood, including diversifying. But it also covers certain aspects that are relevant in your context, be that nutrition, be that health, be that GBV or other things. It covers training on basic financial literacy, and it accompanies households on this sort of journey of changing their livelihoods and really starting to believe in themselves again, regain agency, and feel empowered to do something, but also crucially have the tools to do something about their circumstances. We work mostly with women. BRAC itself works exclusively with women. Most of our governments also work with women. And what we are now doing, and this part of BRAC that I work with, is that we are saying, can we reimagine how you deliver that program, which was obviously designed around BRAC and a NGO model around caseworkers, etc., in such a way that it's easier for governments to deliver, having the same impact, but getting there in a completely different way.
And it is absolutely wonderful to see these women in these group meetings being so. One thing is to sort of learn about how they have grown, their livelihoods have grown. So, but for me, what was like super heartening is to see like how confident they are, right? Like we are seeing, we were part of meetings where the newly joined group is there and also graduated women are there. And the way the graduated women, their articulation, the way they think about it and the way they kind of speak about it, it was so such a wide gap, and the BRAC Bangladesh people were saying that's what happens in the 18 to 24 months, where they really understand what is that they have to do and the amount of agency that they gain. So yeah, thank you. I mean, I kind of remember that trip to Bangladesh. But can you tell us a little bit about what you have been doing in BRAC International for the last 2 years?
Yeah, so
specifically.
As you said, I think the most powerful thing, there are two things that are incredibly powerful about this program. The one is just seeing how the women, mostly women we work with, change, right? And how they regain agency and hope and belief in themselves. And that shows, right? That's the one really powerful thing. The other really powerful thing is that the impact of this program sustains after the end of the program, right? So you can visit, as you did, visit women who've been out of the program for 5, 6, 10 years. And instead of falling back into the circumstances they were in before, they're actually still improving. So what we've been trying to do is to recreate those type of impacts on women, but getting there in a different way because we're working with governments, right? Why are we working with government? It's about scale, right? So as I told you, BRAC International was created. The model was replicated all over the world by various NGOs in partnership with governments. But somehow governments always looked at it and said, you know, not really for me to scale up, even though we had all of the impact, all of the great things. And when I say we, I don't mean BRAC. I mean a whole bunch of organizations out there, whole bunch of research institutions that have been doing work on the World Bank, lots of different actors, right? So, and if governments were taking it up, they were often not implementing parts of the program in the way, therefore undermining the impact of the program itself, right? So what I've been doing, or what we've been doing at the Ultra Poor Graduation Initiative in the last 2 years, is reimagine the program completely, right? So saying, okay, in the past, the program design was largely held constant, right? You have to do the following, you have to provide the asset, you have to have these coaches, they have to do the following, you know, blah, 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 blah. What we are now doing is saying, let's think rather about holding the impact on the participant constant and reimagine how we get the program together to get there. And because most governments are also resource constrained, our approach has really been to say, let's build on what already exists and think about repackaging it into a time-bound and sequence program. And then make sure that this coaching part exists, which usually doesn't exist to the same extent in a lot of programs. Now, this sounds very simple, but, you know, one thing government really struggle with is actually coordinating with other parts of government, right? So in a way, we've turned something that would have been a funding issue of trying to raise lots of new funds for a new program into a little bit of a coordination program where we're saying, can we layer? Can we bundle existing programming? Can we see only the bit that is missing and then look for funding for that? Can we also say, okay, so the coach that I spoke about in the original model is one person. Does it have to be one person? Can it be a whole network of people, you know? So really saying, okay, we have all of these preconceived ideas. Let's throw them sort of not in the bin, you know, but
reimagine them.
Reimagine them, right? And I think I should be really like clear here. Reimagining is obviously risky, right? You don't know whether you're going to be successful. And we don't have to reimagine everything in every context, right? In some contexts, the governments already have a labor force that they can use to do the coaching, for example. Great. So then let's stick with the old model, right? Or labor is cheap, or people live close by one another. But in other contexts, let's take northern Kenya, you know, where you have to travel really far distance, labor scarce, it's very expensive. Is it really the best way to say to a government that you have to hire this quite expensive workforce and have them spend most of their time driving from A to B, you know? So can we go back to the drawing board, right? And can we experiment a little bit about how to have the same or similar or maybe even better impact, but in a different way?
Speaking of the drawing boards, I just want to take a pause here and just play a small game, which was essentially something that Well, I was supposed to do it at the beginning. Really forgot. But the idea here is, if you've played Pictionary before,
Back in the day.
back in the days, of course, is to kind of pick up a piece, draw, and let's see if we can guess it. Aruna, we'll start with you.
Wow. Okay.
Good. Here's one, and here's your pad.
Start with the one who can do the least amount of drawing.
Well, let's see about
You have a team that can draw really well, so I'm assuming that you're inspired.
I'm inspired, but definitely not qualified. People are going to judge me. I know people are going to judge me, but that's okay.
This is what Aruna draw. I have no clue what it means. Is it
someone going down a road?
Yes. Yes. What is that? What is that?
A journey?
Thank you very much. Yes.
should be easy, but also difficult when I can't draw to save my life.
What? Oh,
Is it a bee?
no, it's like a caterpillar hatching into a
Oh, a transformation?
Oh.
Okay, thanks. We're doing much better than we did yesterday. So, but
Okay, well, now
this is your.
no.
Which only shows you that you have very intelligent guests and host today.
I don't know how to draw this one.
Try something.
I will explain in a second why it's so difficult to draw this, because it talks about
It's a box on.
Graduation.
Oh, that is very good. Oh,
Before, this is the what you drew
yeah, that's nice. That's a cat.
as the graduation hat.
That's
that
quite
was easy.
nice. Yes, I think that's good.
maybe I should just, if you allow me. The reason I struggle to draw this a little bit is because the term graduation is obviously something that is applied to our program a lot, but it's also one that we're grappling with a lot, right? Because we want to make sure that people understand that you have to graduate out of poverty, right? It's, you shouldn't graduate out of the program just because the program is over, right? It's really about achieving transformative impact on the participants' life, and only then can graduation happen, right? So it is one of the most sort of misunderstood things about our model.
And you spoke of reimagination as a very risky thing to do. And that is what I want to kind of double click on. I want to understand what that means and what are the challenges that you kind of faced both as Tefli and as BRAC International when you kind of go through that process of reimagination.
Why did I say it's risky? Well, because implementing the program in the traditional way, we know works, and we know it works across the world. Implementing the program in a different way, in the end, we don't know whether it's going to work, right? And it's a cross-sectorial program. And, I mean, obviously government implement many very complex programs, in healthcare and whatnot, but cross-sectorial, cross-departmental coordination is difficult, and aligning mandates and all of this is difficult. So you asked me, why is it risky, right? For me and also as for BRAC, let's start with BRAC, right? I think what really attracted me to joining BI is that instead of saying, oh, this is too risky, and the graduation approach is associated with us, and we should just continue to implement, and we'll raise funds to implement ourselves. The leadership of BRAC International, Shamran Abed, he and others also our managing director decided, our founder had the sense, he said, small is beautiful, scale is necessary, right? And this is the ethos of the organization. So the ethos of taking risk, and scaling instead of staying small and beautiful and controlling everything is in the DNA of the organization. Now, it's obviously risky because we might fail and, it could, have repercussions for the wider graduation agenda. But if we want to do something about poverty globally, we need to be audacious. We need to have big ideas, right? It's not okay to do lots of small things and then say, oh, well, I didn't want to take the risk and therefore I've been successful. But you haven't actually done anything about what you really want to do, which is really about reducing poverty at scale. So they would probably say it's risky, but not really, right? Because what's more risky is not to do something about poverty, right?
Correct.
For me personally, in a way, I'm an outsider, right? So there are a lot of people who've been in BRAC all of their life, who've developed the original program, who have played around with it, who are very attached to the way of implementing it. And said, I'm an outsider, right? Like, I come from working with governments who I saw struggling implementing the program. So for me, the risk is absolutely necessary. If you ask me what's the cost of not doing it, the cost is like that people implement this thing and it doesn't have any impact on the participant, or it's only implemented in very small pockets and with high donor funding or by NGOs, right? So for me, it's like, it's really a necessary risk to take to rethink the model. So that's at the model end. Now, when we decide what parts of the individual program to experiment with, it gets a bit more difficult, right? First of all, I think you need to sort of identify what the biggest hurdle for the program, the possible impact of the program could be. And in a lot of cases, that is around the coaching function. Why? Because a large workforce of, highly motivated, relatively skilled, frontline workers is really not available to a lot of governments in a lot of contexts. Or if it's available, is it affordable? Maybe it's not. Should it be affordable? Another question, right? So rethinking that part of the model is sort of where I started with, right? Because I think it is sort of the crux of, it's going to be the make or break of getting this to scale in a lot of parts of the world, right? Like the real sort of big experimentation is in like, can you unbundle what used to be delivered by one or very few people into something that doesn't have to be, but could be delivered by a wider range of experts. In the past, this is the conversation has always been about training and that government should be hiring a bigger workforce, right? And then governments have responded saying, well, we don't have the money.
It's not sustainable.
Not. So there was a bit of an impasse almost in the sector, right? With like, on the one hand, the implementers saying you ought to do this, donors funding programs where this part of the program would then be paid for by donor funding. The moment the program gets taken over by government, this falls apart again. And we weren't actually talking to one another and winning those kind of conversations. In my old job, I saw some of that play out, right? So I think this is the area where I decided to sort of focus the most sort of radical redesign, because it's just, I think it's necessary. Otherwise, we're not going to be that. Is it going to work? Well, hopefully. Does it look the same in each country? No. It's completely different in each country, right? The only thing that is common is to say, don't just treat it as a training problem, If you do not have enough staff, if the staffs are like part-time or something, you cannot train them into the original model. You have to then think about, how do you incentivize them? How do you support them? How do you equip them? How do you train them, etc. Right? Like, so really sort of saying like, let's look at this a bit more holistically.
That's so. Can you talk a little bit about, you talked about unbundling. So can you sort of like talk a little bit more about that so everyone understands what does that look like?
Yeah. So, and I think this is quite common to a lot of NGO programming. You have like sort of your caseworker, the one that goes into the community all the time. And as a result, that person does a lot, right? They do everything from selecting the beneficiaries, telling people about the program, enrolling them in the program, supporting them through the program cycle, collecting the monitoring data, and delivering all of the different parts of the program, right? That is not really necessary if you're a government, first of all. First of all, most governments, including here, as I know, have their own ways of how they like to target, their own systems that they do. Sensitization about programs is usually done through certain like government structures that are different in each country, etc. But also, as I told you earlier, the coaching part actually includes a whole bunch of things, right? It includes hard skills training and transfer relevant to the livelihood. It includes psychosocial support, right, to around empowerment, agency, and so on. And then it includes some sort of softer skills, right? And then there's that relational aspect where someone shows up for you that in the past didn't really receive any support from any program, let alone someone who really comes regularly to you and works with you. I mean, all of us, if we've ever tried to change anything or something, we have apps, we have friends, everyone knows and supports us, the same type of thing, right? So when we said unbundling, and that's we also what we did with Aruna and Sanjay when they came to Bangladesh, we said, let's look at all of this and let's unpack what's actually happening here, right? There are some transactional things, right? Where, some skill is being transferred and so on. And that could be transferred by a bunch of things. There is some relational thing here, right? And especially the people in the sector who worried about sort of reimagining this way of doing coaching, what they're really worried about is that relational thing, where they say without that relational thing, the program can't work. I think that's probably true. I guess the question is like, how frequent does that relational aspect have to manifest itself? And how does it have to be done? So we're experimenting, for example, with more group sessions than individual sessions, right? A heavier sort of engagement, especially in person at the beginning of a program, right? So lots of these type of modalities, right? Where you don't lose the in-person contact, but you experiment with different ways of focusing on the relational aspect and taking some of the other, M&E targeting, but also the transactional parts out and thinking about how you could deliver this differently, either through technology or through different actors or different parts of the government.
Right.
Listening skills and empathy skills are the main thing that, in my mind, these coaches also have to have, right? And by the way, obviously the coaches have different names in each country, like depending on the local context, but being able to listen, show empathy, right? Like, and be actually empathetic to the person's circumstances. This should not be a lecturing thing where I teach you and I coach you to behave in a certain way. Right. But it's really about, I support you on this journey.
So in what we saw in Bangladesh, like many of these group members really think of the coaches as part of the family, right? They even go and talk to them about things which are outside of the scope of the coach, and the coaches still do it actually. So that's kind of like, So Stephanie, I wanted to, if you could talk a little bit about your specific approach while you are scaling this in very different governments. What is that you're doing actually? And how on building this, this model where it can be adapted by many countries. And so what has been your approach towards that? And can you kind of break it down for us as to what are the elements to that and who are the ecosystem players in this?
Yes. So the first part is, I think I already touched on this, is that instead of designing from scratch, right, and saying to government, you need to, these are the different parts of the program, and you now need to look for consumption stipend and, an investment for seed capital or an asset or something, and you need to look for this workforce and so on. We are working with governments on what they've already got available and what they can anchor this program.
So can you give us an example of that?
So I'm going to give a few examples, because actually what is happening as a result is that every government is anchoring this on something else, right? Like in South Africa, for example, they have this cash transfer program that is nationally available, no fragmentation like here. So it's like it's a national program, and they're saying, okay, we want to work with the participants of this one of those cash transfer programs and use that as the anchor and the infrastructure on which we build this program. And then we're going to other parts of the government for the asset investment and the skills training, et cetera, right? In other countries, it's perceived as a livelihood program, or it's perceived as a youth program. So we are starting where governments are, right? Rather than saying this is a social protection program, this is a community-based program, this is a livelihood program. We're saying in your sort of political priorities, where does this sit? Then with them, we do a sort of analysis of saying, what have you got available that you could bundle and package together, right? And then we help and support them in sort of thinking through how to do that, how to deliver this through the government system. We sort of explain the details of what the program involves. We're really like a thought partner, right? We don't do anything. We don't go to communities or anything. We really just support governments in thinking through how they can build such a program in their context, fit for their purposes, but also fit for the resources and the capacity they've got available, very crucially, right? So there's
completely customized to that.
Yeah. So, and it's looking quite different. I mean, now a couple of, like, I'm telling you, we're bundling, and that's not necessarily what we were thinking when we started. That's just what we've seen a lot of governments do, right?
Right.
And then one key thing that we're doing, back to the coaching is that we're helping sort of really think through where might that come from, right? Like, where might that come from? If it's coming in a different way, how do you leverage that? That goes, I think, I'm still new to all this language that you guys use, but the ecosystem language, right? Like, what other organizations can government rely on to deliver this program? And those could be other government departments, like we discussed. They could be NGOs that are available in the sector. They could be private sector, right? This is a livelihood program. So actually, it's a livelihood program that also addresses certain social problems, right? So the potential of your ecosystem that could contribute to this are endless in a way, right? And you could even think more broadly about really, thinking about the markets and the wider system which people integrate. So I think, again, that is slightly differently depending on how governments like to implement. In some countries, governments will implement most of the program components. In other countries, they are trying to convince and coordinate NGOs to deliver a large part of the program. In other parts of the country, they will pull in expert NGOs just for, like, say, the psychosocial support and so on, but rely on, say, the economic cluster for other parts. So it's more getting that ecosystem thinking of this doesn't all have to be done by this one line department, right? Because whichever department you anchor this in, it will have a mandate, and the mandate is narrower than what this program needs, right? So you either then start to replicate all of this in your program for which you don't have funding, plus probably your colleagues are going to ask you why I am the minister of so-and-so, why is this happening? Or you basically build coalitions, right? And this can be civil society coalition, interdepartmental coalitions, ecosystem coalitions, and so on. Now, I think the beauty of that is that if it works, it could mean that actually the program can be even more impactful, right? Because you're actually crowding in higher level expertise to do some of this.
You're having some early success in South Africa. So could you talk about what does that look like? And do you really you look at it and think like, wow, this is actually moving? I mean, even though the journey is going to be very long, do you see some movements, and what are those movements? What does that look like to you?
Yeah. So first of all, obviously, it's not really us, right? It's the South African government.
Absolutely.
So really, that's so.
Who as an orchestrator who is working with all these people?
Yeah, so the South African government is implementing this program called Generating Better Livelihoods, and really what they want to do is that they have a very successful and very instrumental cash transfer program, right? That is really supporting a very large part of their population, and the grants have been very successful in alleviating poverty. But what they have been less successful at is like providing people with enough financial support to really access transformative livelihoods, right? So this is really a program that is not meant to replace social protection, but to provide additional opportunities on this, right? And yes, so they've been quite successful, and we're working with this amazing partner in South Africa called Finmark Trust. They've been really successful at, going through the initial design process. Right. So the program has now started to implement. 720 participants are enrolled in across 3 different provinces and 7 different sites. It's in urban and rural areas. And out of necessity, there had to be experimentation around the coaching, right? Yeah. Because the fiscal space is tight. And the whole argument is let's first show that it works in South Africa. And it's hard to make the case to government tech. We're going to show, but you have to first hire 100,000 people, Yeah. So what we did in South Africa is exactly what I described. We unbundled the different parts of the program. And de facto, what you now have is that there were some administrators from the agency that traditionally dispersed the cash transfers who've become these, what they're called linkage champions in South Africa, the coaches. And really what they do is they basically project manage and coordinate a whole range of network actors to come together to deliver specific support to the participant in a sequence and time-bound manner in line with how the program should roll out, right? Now, this obviously sounds very great and linear, and, it doesn't always work in that way, and not the same. one problem with the ecosystem or relying on other partners. They might not always be willing. They might have funding issues. They have other priorities. They're not the same amount of actors available in rural areas as in urban areas. So the job of the linkage champion actually differs a little bit depending on where they are and who else they can draw in, right? But you get the idea of it, right? Yeah. They're right, sort of like they sit at the center of a network of different actors and organizations that they can pull in, right? And what we are working with you all on is to say, can we build a platform that supports these coaches in delivering this task, right? In three ways, really. One, dealing with this coordination issue with all of the different actors. And this is not just a coordination actors as in like, hey, can you come tomorrow? But also, I need to know whether you've been there. I need to know your thoughts. Your material needs to be on there so that I don't always have to call you, right? So in the future,
both the transactional relational aspects that you're all talking about, actually.
So that's what. So it's the coordination issue. Over time, obviously, we want to also build content on there, right? So that you're less reliant on always convincing all of these organizations and departments to give the basic trainings, right? Over time, you could build on this platform a lot of the training that then can be used by the program. And this only really works if the coach is motivated and incentivized, right? Now, you can incentivize in many different ways. And actually, Sanjay told me this, right? Like, you can obviously incentivize around money. Yeah. You can incentivize with prestige. You can incentivize by sort of future bankable sort of like prestige, and different, and there's a fourth one that's now skipped my mind, right? But basically, what we wanted to do is build a platform that also gives something back to the person who is that coach, right? By continuously providing them with training opportunities, and depending on the context, that could be training opportunities, certificates, it could be maybe, I don't know, opportunities to other jobs. We're still in the early stages of figuring out and also talking to coaches in different locations about what, in the absence of necessarily like a high salary, what else?
Credentialing. Some of these things are like credentialing them, understand how much have they learned so far.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, right? Like I didn't think that sort of certificates would be a really big thing, right? But actually some of the coaches we've spoken to, for them, it's a really big thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think trying to take your own, preconceived ideas out of it and really sort of working and through these sprints that we've been doing, asking sort of like the different parts of the audience, you as the person in the government department running the program, what do you need to see? Yeah. Right. You as the sort of like on the ground implementing part of the government, what do you need, And then you as the coaches, what do you need, to do your day job, but also to remain motivated and want to work on this, right? And then try to design a platform that speaks to all of that, which will then allow us to deal with one of the key scale constraints, which is a highly motivated, dedicated workforce on the ground, right? And that's the idea here, right?
Interesting.
So what's your sort of like aspiration that is actually like 2 years down the line?
I mean,
what would you like to see that will make you really happy saying, oh, this is kind of going somewhere?
I mean, I have sort of two aspirations. One linked to what we are doing, which is like, I think if we can build this platform and an MIS that it interacts with, that means we can get quality coaching to graduation program participants in a range of different contexts. So it's agnostic to the workforce that government wants to use as the anchor point and is able to support any of those workforce to do a good job at supporting the participant.
Talking about, across geographies, actually.
Yeah, globally. Okay, yeah. That's one thing. But I actually think frontline service delivery, more generally, the fact that they need support is the bigger question here, right? Because in a way, this is the same type of problem, whether you're delivering, I don't know, healthcare or anything, right? That we have people at the front, often they're not well paid, often they're volunteering, often they're doing 1,000 different things. So developing a platform that supports them, that incentivizes them, gives something back to this workforce without which the world would not be running. If we can develop something that is a useful tool for that, I think that would be really instrumental beyond graduation, to be honest. Right? And using technology but in an enabling way to help with that, right? In ways that make sense, that take some of the tasks that nowadays no one needs to do anymore, right? Maybe one more thing to say, like working with government is a slow process, right? Because it's a slow and a fast process, right? It never really goes at like a sort of comfortable phase, right? So we could be sprinting, or we could be moving slowly, right? And in a way, that is part of the challenge. You have to be ready to support either of those.
So working with the government is like a marathon. So you just have to manage your pace based on how it's going.
Yeah. And your fitness level. So in case you only just...
All of us talk about how challenging this is. You know, it can be a sprint, it can be a marathon. But can you also, a lot of times it's also very hopeful. And you have, you know, in the last 10 months or so, I've worked with you also, I kind of like witness some of the real things that you've won actually, right? For it to move forward. When I see all these government officials coming for these sprints and the amount of enthusiasm with which they kind of like operate, it's also very hopeful. So can you sort of share a moment where you felt like you did it and then something happened and you said like, yeah, you know what? I think I'm hopeful for this moment that, you know, all that I did, this happened and it really, really makes me feel like I can do this again, actually, for another day.
The model in which we operate is that we have, in the countries where we're partnering with governments, we have country teams. And they just do a phenomenal job, right? Because like, I mean, I live in the UK as I run a global team. I provide sort of support to our country teams, but the teams in country, they're like really at the cold front of this, right? And I've been really amazed actually by the traction we have gotten with governments, right? And if you think about this, it's not like, you know, a traditional donor approach where you say, would you like to do a graduation program? We're going to give you this massive grant to do it, you know? No, it's about sort of really selling an idea and a vision, right? To governments and then working with them on that. And I really am amazed at what my colleagues have managed to do there, right? How good they are at building this political sort of support for these programs. We work with a triangle that Imago is an organization sort of developed, and we were using something similar. Now we shifted to this, which really says like, for governments to scale programs, you need 3 things to be in place, right? The program needs to technically work, right? And have an impact. It needs to be deliverable through administrative systems, needs to be administratively feasible, and it needs to be politically supportable. Right? And what we are really trying to do at BRAC is to bear all of those things in mind at all times, right? And this plays out and is done sort of and led by our teams in country, right? And if you ask me what like really gives me hope is just the amazing sort of traction we've gotten with that, right? Absolutely. And also government is actually quite courageous in a way, right? Like in many contexts, we're getting going. We haven't figured out half of the design things, but we're starting, you know? So you're building the car as you're driving it. It's an iterative process because like, you know, there's urgent need to get going. And if they're convinced of the idea, they want to get going. They don't want to hear that you now need to go do 1 year of design and then get back, right? So we also need to get more comfortable with this notion of iterative progress and iterative improvement over time. So yeah, this makes me very hopeful in the sense. And then, you know, just seeing people enrolled in the program and really even starting to see some of the interim bits of success. And to take a South African example, before Christmas, we were in one of our pilot sites and some of the participants had started to receive some of the parts of the program, really just the psychosocial support, really like around mindset. And now they were sort of feeding back to the government officials, both from the province and from national, who'd come to listen to them. And I mean, the program has barely done anything. It hasn't done the big push investment in the livelihood yet. But people's narrative had already changed a lot and people were hopeful again. And the government officials, as a result, were like, wow, this is like a totally different meeting to the meetings that we usually go to. Wow. Right? This is a different tone. And you could see a little spark of, hope that maybe this could be something that could work. And those moments really, for me, are very amazing. Now, then there's a danger that people get carried away and forget that there's like a lot to do to have the impact we want to have.
Yeah.
And without that, it's not good enough, you know. But yeah, there's a lot, and then there's obviously a lot of frustration, like, you know, 2 steps forward, 5 steps backwards, and whatnot, you know, but it's these elements. And for me, what I really care about is, you know, governments are there to stay, right? They are the ones delivering for their citizens, especially in poverty and social protection. And for me, it's like a social protection expert. It's also the contract between governments and its citizens, right? Like that to help you during bad times, when you're vulnerable, when you're in need of support, right? So enabling governments to be able to fulfill that through quality programming, right? At scale. I mean, that is like sort of what drives me, right? And that's if we can make that work, that will be
pretty arousing. Yes, that'd be pretty. Thank you, Stephanie. That is a lot of sharing, and like on the very hopeful note also, actually, and like very happy to be part of this, doing this with you.